It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, and the left fights the right, and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been out in Cornwall today talking about food, Rwanda and the row over the Northern Irish Protocol. We're covering all these on the show today, plus trans conversion therapy. And today's constituency surgery is about a Welsh boxer who represented Britain in the Olympics in 1928, but was banned from competing for British boxing titles because he was black. And an exclusive Real Meat interview with Scottish Conservative MP Andrew Bowie. First, it's the news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. A High Court judge has ruled that a 12-year-old boy who's been at the centre of a life support dispute is dead and that his treatment should stop. Archie Battersby suffered brain damage in an incident at home in April. Doctors at the Royal London Hospital say his life support treatment should end and that his ventilator should be disconnected. Archie's mother says, as her son's heart is still beating, they're going to appeal the decision.
I'm devastated and extremely disappointed by the judge's ruling. After weeks of fighting a legal battle, when I wanted to be by my little boy's bedside, basing the judgment on an MRI test, which is the first time ever, and that he's likely to be dead, is not good enough.
The government will unveil changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol today, including relaxed checks on goods and allowing ministers to override elements of the current agreement. Labour have warned the measures will break international law, and a number of Conservative MPs have said they're unhappy with the plans. Well, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is warning a trade war over these changes with the EU would be a gross overreaction.
The problem at the moment, which is that in Northern Ireland, the Stormont Assembly, the government of Northern Ireland, can't meet because of the effects of the protocol. What it does is it creates unnecessary barriers on trade east-west. What we can do is fix that. It's not a big deal. We can fix it in such a way as to remove those bureaucratic barriers, but without putting up barriers on trade moving north-south in the island of Ireland as well. That's what we want to do.
Government plans to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda are currently facing two separate legal challenges in court today. The court's already heard that 20 people have had their Rwanda tickets cancelled. 11 are still expected to be on the first flight tomorrow. A High Court judge ruled the flight could go ahead last week, but two groups are contesting that. Lee Anderson MP for Ashfield said, "We've got to put an end to people crossing the channel."
If it fails, then we've got a big problem. It says to the rest of the world our borders are open, and the evil gangs, the human traffickers will continue to take money off people to send them across the channel. Meanwhile, genuine asylum seekers from places like Ukraine will suffer because of that. We welcome refugees from all over the world, people that are in genuine need. But quite frankly, let me be honest again, make the point to your viewers that the vast majority of the people coming over the channel are not genuine asylum seekers.
The Labour leader is being investigated by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards over potential breaches of rulings on earnings and gifts. The investigation centres on a number of late declarations. Sir Keir Starmer has been paid for legal advice, for example, before 2020 when he became the leader of the opposition, and he's also received an advance on a book that he's writing. Sir Keir's insisted he's not broken the MP's code of conduct. Now, the Prime Minister's also launched the UK's new post-Brexit food strategy today, which he says will back British farmers and create more jobs. The measures aim to strengthen supply chains and increase domestic food production. But a leaked draft version of the plan's been heavily criticised. The co-founder of the restaurant chain Leon, Henry Dimbleby, led a major review of the country's current food industry, and he says the new plans ignore salt and sugar tax and government action on obesity. The Competition and Markets Authority has confirmed it will carry out a review of the fuel market after average prices hit record highs. The Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng tweeted that the watchdog will look into why fuel prices are quick to rise but slower to come down. It follows record prices at the pump, with the average price of petrol hitting 185 pence per litre, a rise of more than 7 pence in a week. A man who was left paralysed from the waist down after being seriously injured in the Manchester Arena bombing has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in a wheelchair. He's raised almost £500,000 for the Spinal Injuries Association. It's 45-year-old Martin Hibbert who made the climb alongside his nurse physio who helped him recover from the bombing in 2017. Well, this is GB News, and we'll have more for you as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, as the government prepares to fly the first illegal migrants to Rwanda in an attempt to put people off crossing the channel in small boats, our reporter Ellie Costello is at the High Court where a legal challenge is underway. And the government brings legislation to Parliament today to override parts of the controversial Northern Irish Protocol. It will face a battle to pass, but will it lead to the resumption of power sharing in Stormont? Dougie Beattie will bring us the latest. I'll bring you the shocking story of Welsh boxer Cuthbert Taylor. He represented Britain in the Olympics in 1928, but was banned from competing for British boxing titles because his dad was black and he was considered not white enough. My Real Me interview today is with Scottish Conservative MP Andrew Bowie. And the government plans to ban conversion therapy, but that ban currently won't extend to the trans community. I'll discuss that with Conservative LGBT+ patron Andrew Boff. The Prime Minister has been on a visit to Cornwall this morning to promote the government's farming strategy. He also took questions on Rwanda and Northern Ireland too. Let's have a look at what he said.
You've got to make sure that you do is that you look after UK food and farming and recognise that we have an opportunity to eat much more of what we grow in this country and produce much more in the UK. So that's why we're supporting Great British farming, putting money into modernisation, into innovation. Just been talking to these incredible courgette farm here, courgette and broccoli. They can now, they've got a machine, a gizmo they've just shown me, can plant 150,000 cabbages per day. Now that cuts costs, and what it also does is in the end it cuts costs for the consumer as well. We're supporting families, as you know, £1,200 for the 8 million most vulnerable households, another £400 to help everybody with the cost of energy. But we've also got to find ways of cutting costs of food and cutting costs of food production. I always said that it would begin with a lot of teething problems and you would have a lot of legal action against it. But and they would try and delay it, and that's inevitable. But what we're trying to do is stop the business model of criminal gangs who are preying on people, moving them across the channel in unseaworthy vessels, risking their lives and sometimes costing their lives. But it's worse than that. What they're doing is undermining people's confidence in legal migration and people's support for legal migration. We have safe and legal routes for people to come into this country. I've just talked about it, for people who to come and work in agriculture or whatever. We have that. It should not be undermined by criminal gangs who are risking people's lives, and that's what the Rwanda policy is all about. I think our higher and our main international obligation is to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, to the peace process in Northern Ireland, getting that Stormont Assembly up and running again. Northern Ireland is fantastic, but it needs government. It needs, particularly now when people are facing pressures from the global cost of living problems with the energy price spikes, you need a government in Northern Ireland. You need Stormont up and running, so we've got a plan to fix it.
So, the first flight to deport migrants to Rwanda is expected to depart tomorrow. The government's proposal has faced criticism, but a High Court ruled on Friday that the first deportation will go ahead. The appeal of that decision, one appeal, is underway today. Our South East of England reporter was at the High Court and sent us this report.
Today we're going to see a number of groups who oppose this policy to send people who arrive illegally into the UK to Rwanda, and they're going to ask for a decision that was made on Friday in a lower court to be reversed. That decision was allowing the first deportation flight to take off tomorrow. Now, our legal system does allow appeals to take place, and that's what we're seeing here in the High Court today. Those groups are going to give a last-ditch attempt to get that plane tomorrow grounded, and those groups will argue, as we heard on Friday, that the Rwanda plan is unfair, unsafe and unlawful. Now, the government is going to argue that Rwanda is a safe country and that this plan is entirely legal. They say that they need to break the human trafficking ring that is operating in the English Channel, and we know that over 10,000 people have already crossed the Channel illegally so far this year. They argue that this is a policy that is very popular with the public. Now, those opposing this flight in the court today have a real challenge in front of them, because the judge on Friday said that there was material public interest in the Home Secretary Priti Patel being able to carry out this policy. He also said he didn't consider any evidence that asylum seekers would be ill-treated in Rwanda. So this flight is going ahead tomorrow unless a judge changes their mind today. So what do we know about that flight taking off tomorrow? Well, it's reported that there are 37 asylum seekers that are supposed to be on that flight that are currently being held in immigration detention centres around the country. Now, they are due to be flown into Rwanda from a secret location in the UK on an undisclosed airline. And now that has obviously been kept secret in order to prevent protests and to try, or anyone trying to stop that plane taking off. But 130 people have reportedly been told that they are going to be deported to Rwanda. Now, we understand that of that original 37, that has almost been whittled down to single figures from those individual legal challenges relating to modern slavery and human rights claims. Only single figures reportedly on that plane now tomorrow, but the lawyers in this court today will be hoping that they can whittle that number down to zero. And not only that, they don't want this to be about people on the flight. They don't want that flight to take off at all. So will they get that injunction this morning? Well, at the moment, that flight is taking off unless a judge changes their mind this morning.
Ellie Costello there. Also today, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is expected to unveil new proposals to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Our Northern Ireland correspondent, Dougie Beattie, is at Stormont for us. Dougie.
Yes, hello. She's meant to get to her feet at around about 3 o'clock, I think, to tell people exactly what she intends to do, to tweak the protocol, to make things better in it or worse as it may be. We don't know. We will wait till we see that. We have a rough idea what's here. But the protocol has caused major problems for the governors of Northern Ireland. Basically, it overwrites Article 6, the Act of the Union. So unionists here, of course, they signed the Good Friday Agreement nearly 25 years ago, say that the Act of Consent has been broken and therefore they do not want to sit in government with nationalists. Now, nationalists, of course, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, are very closely connected to Dublin, and Dublin is inside the EU. So this protocol basically keeps Northern Ireland inside EU regulations and legislation, while the rest of the UK are free to do what they want inside their own regulations. Now, this is causing serious problems because it may cause a border to be in the, well, it has caused a border to be in the Irish Sea rather than on the land. Unionists don't like that. And of course, about 20% of the food that is eaten in Britain is produced here in Northern Ireland. Now, Britain's only about 58 to 60% self-sufficient in food, and this year has seen serious rises in the price of food. In fact, I was at a cattle mart on Wednesday, and beef now is at £4.20 to £4.70 a kilo on the hoof. That is serious problems for anybody going to fill their shopping basket, and that's continuing to rise. And of course, that is cattle that is being finished at 20 months, and they are continental cattle like Limousines, Belgian Blues, where our indigenous cattle, the Aberdeen Anguses, the Dexters, are finished in grass and sold at about 15 months. So people are now going for that cattle and driving the price of that up as well. So this is having serious problems on the price of not only our food in Northern Ireland, but also the food coming in to the UK. And that, I would imagine, is more what the Tory party are looking at and trying to settle down, especially this year. I spent last week in Dublin, and they say they definitely don't want a trade war. £60 billion a year goes between Britain and Dublin. And of course, if there was a trade war, they'd be the first to be hit, and they'd be the hardest to be hit. So Simon Coveney has said that relations between the UK and Britain are at their lowest that they've ever been. So that is also causing problems, because Sinn Féin, that sits here behind us and is due to be the First Minister, is also the largest party in the Republic of Ireland, although not enough to form a government. So if they go ahead and that legislation harms the Republic of Ireland's economy, Sinn Féin will find it hard to sit in government in the south of Ireland, while actually governing over a place of the UK that is hurting the Republic's economy. So this is extremely fine line politics, but you have to bring it back to where it was, and that was back to the Good Friday Agreement and consent. So unionists are now at the position here where they're not going to sit, and even this legislation going forward, I don't believe, and I've been told it's not enough to get them back in until it actually becomes law, because amendments and so forth could go on this going through the House, and of course at the end of it could be a diluted protocol of some sort, or changes on the protocol. Can it make it through the House of Lords? Who knows? But we're in for a rough year, and behind all of this is really about protecting the integrity of the European single market. Years ago, Tito was the president or prime minister of Yugoslavia. He was also embedded with the USSR, but he was welcomed by Europe. And in that period of time, the Americans stopped Cuban sugar being brought in under sanctions. They didn't want Cuban sugar sold and Fidel having any money. But Tito bought the sugar through Russia and rebagged it into Yugoslavian bags and then sold it back into Europe. That's exactly what the EU don't want to happen with British goods coming from the UK mainland into Northern Ireland, rebranded back through the south and back into the EU. The argument, of course, is over divergence and whether our legislation and regulation in the UK will be up to that of the EU. Now, we can all say that that's already happened. There is already dual streams in place because Brazil and Argentina supply an awful lot of meat to Britain and to the EU. But we've also found out since the Ukrainian conflict that Ukraine supplies a lot of grain and potatoes, as well as Russia and Belarus with fertiliser. So who knows what legislation and regulation was put in all that before it found its way into the EU. So all of this is smoke and mirrors, all still to play for, and it could be at least 3 or 4 months before we see this place up and running behind.
Thank you so much for the update, Dougie. Thank you. My constituency surgery today is the incredible story of Cuthbert Taylor, a Welsh boxer who represented Britain in the Olympics in 1928, but was banned from competing for British boxing titles because a colour bar, which deemed him not white enough because his dad was black, was in place. Now his family, unsurprisingly, want an apology. Back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's almost unbelievable that Welsh boxer Cuthbert Taylor, who represented Britain in the Olympics in 1928, was banned from competing for British boxing titles because his dad was black. So he was deemed not white enough to be British. Well, now his family want an apology from the British Boxing Board, and they're campaigning for this with their local MP for Merthyr Tydfil, Gerard Jones. I'm delighted that Gerald joins me in the studio, and Nick joins me from the constituency. Hello, Nick. I'm going to start with you. Honestly, this story. So between 1911 and 1948, the British Board of Boxing operated a colour bar which prevented non-white boxers from competing for British titles. How did you find out what happened to your granddad?
It's always really been in the family history. We've always known about it. It is, how can I explain it? It was something my grandmother always told us about. My grandfather never spoke about it. My father never spoke about it either, but my grandmother always spoke about it and said how unjust it was. And if it had been anybody else, minus the colour, then yes, he would have. It had been sanctioned for every fight that he was entitled to fight for. But as it was, he was entitled to nothing, basically. As soon as he turned professional, everything sort of, it changed completely. When he was amateur, he was entitled to fight for the country, no worries whatsoever for Great Britain. Olympic Games 1928 Amsterdam, Altian Games 28 Dublin, and yet as soon as the professional come in, and the Welsh Boxing Board of Control and the British Boxing Board of Control amalgamated, and that's when the serious problems started then.
Just describe, is it possible to describe how your family feel about this historic injustice?
We feel absolutely, well, we're disgusted by it, but absolutely feel let down by a country which is supposedly so far in advance, but also so backwards in lots of things as well. And you know, we understand it was a different time and the rules were different. But when you're only requesting and asking for an apology, which was basically should be fundamentally entitled to having anyway, because of the injustice that the family is.
Yeah, I'm going to turn to your local MP now. Gerald, how did you come to work with Nick, with Cuthbert's family?
Well, they contacted me at an advice surgery, actually, in the constituency, and told me the story of Cuthbert Taylor. And, you know, like everybody who hears the story is astounded, really, on how something like that has happened. And, you know, at that time, sadly, that was lawful. You know, clearly wasn't right and should never have been the case, but it was lawful. And I think as far as we are now, you know, the family are really keen and are really disappointed that the boxing authorities haven't engaged with them, which is obviously why they contacted me. And as Nick has said there, you know, all the family are asking for really is an apology to recognise the injustice, historic as it may be, but it was an injustice that hurt the family and still hurts them today.
And you've raised this issue in Parliament in your capacity as the family's local MP. Just tell us about some of the things you've done in Parliament.
Well, we've raised it. We've had two debates, actually. The last one was last week. We raised it as part of the Black History Month 2 years ago. And we've done work in the constituency. We've erected a plaque in one of the places where Cuthbert Taylor trained. So there is a lot of knowledge, growing knowledge actually now in the constituency of the injustice. And we wanted to do that to recognise it at home. But I think, you know, from the family's point of view, they are really keen that this apology is given to basically recognise that injustice. And, you know, the campaign last week, the debate last week, and even the sport minister has called on the boxing board to recognise and to engage with the family and to try to put this wrong right. So you're a Labour MP, but the government, when you've raised it in Parliament, they're absolutely on board with helping the family too. Absolutely. I mean, I think the position isn't defensible, really. I don't think anybody can defend that. And I think, you know, what the boxing board need to do is to just issue that apology and to try and you know, recognise the fact that this has caused huge hurt to the family over many years. Absolutely. Nick, let me come back to you. What sort of things do they say to you? We know you've written to the British Boxing Board to ask for this apology. Have you had any encouraging words from them?
No encouraging words whatsoever. My brother received a letter from them stating basically that was how it was then. Tough. That was basically their answer. In obviously more words than that, but that was the gist of it. Those were the times. Like it or lump it. That was basically what they told us.
That's astonishing. Astonishing, Nick. Nick, something positive. We hope you have much more positivity on this journey and in this campaign. But something positive is the plaque that has been unveiled at the courthouse in Merthyr Tydfil. What does that mean to you and the family?
It means a lot. You know, it does mean a lot. It's hard to put into words exactly what it does feel like, and the pride in that we get off seeing it. It's just a shame that it took so long to actually get any recognition, apart from the old timers as in Merthyr. They always used to say, God, he was a hard man, but he was a gentleman, you know, a gentleman through and through.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
What's next for the campaign? Just final question to both of you. Where next?
We're just going to keep plugging and plugging and plugging until we do get some result out of them, because they're going to have to learn that we are Taylors and we will keep fighting until the very end for it.
Good for you. Do you have anything to add there, finally?
Well, I think Nick put it very succinctly there. I think that, you know, the fight will go on and we will continue to campaign because, you know, it's historic, but it needs to be put right, and the boxing authorities need to act on that.
I'm so pleased that we were able to discuss this today. Thank you to Nick. Thank you so much, Nick. Best of luck, and thank you to you, Gerald, too. Thank you. My Real Me interview today is with Conservative MP Andrew Bowie. He says the SNP should be focusing on the problems Scotland faces rather than obsessing about independence. And we're discussing conversion therapy with LGBT plus Conservative spokesperson Andrew Boff. Coming ban doesn't apply if you're trans, but many think it should. First, it's Rosie with the news.
Good afternoon, it's coming up to 12:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, a High Court judge has ruled that a 12-year-old boy who's been at the centre of a life support dispute is dead and that his treatment should stop. Archie Battersby suffered brain damage in an incident at home in April. Doctors at the Royal London Hospital say his life support treatment should end and that his ventilator should be disconnected. Archie's mother says as her son's heart is still beating, they're going to appeal the decision. The government's going to unveil changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol later today. It will include the ability for ministers to unilaterally override the current agreement. The new legislation will include relaxing checks on goods arriving in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said the measures marked a low point in the UK's approach to Brexit. The government plans to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda is facing two separate legal challenges in courts today. The courts heard 20 people have had their Rwanda tickets cancelled, but 11 are still expected to be on the first flight tomorrow. Both appeals are going through the courts today. The Labour leader is being investigated by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards over potential breaches of rules on earnings and gifts. The investigation centres on a number of late declarations. The payments relate to legal advice he provided the year he became opposition leader, and also an advance on a book he received that he was still writing. Sir Keir has insisted he's not broken the MP's code of conduct. Now, the UK economy fell by 0.3% in April, according to official figures. UK GDP is nearly 1% above its pre-pandemic level. The Chancellor says he's fully focused on growing the economy. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.218 to the dollar. The pound is 1.164 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,524.36 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, and the left fights the right, and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, time for my latest Real Me interview, where I spoke with Andrew Bowie, the Conservative MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. He's very critical of Nicola Sturgeon's desire to hold a second Scottish independence referendum. But he is very much looking forward to becoming a dad this summer, though his constituency is 550 miles away from Westminster. Andrew Bowie, you're 34 years old. What was the moment you realised you were a Conservative?
That's a really good question, Gloria. It's actually one of the toughest questions because it was quite unusual being a sort of teenager in the mid-noughties in Scotland and deciding I'm going to vote for the Conservative Party. But I suppose that I fully realised it in about 2007 when I was in the Royal Navy, and Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, had just become Prime Minister. 10 years of Tony Blair. I think on the whole they were doing quite a good job, but there's certain areas where I just felt they were letting the country down. And one of the areas was in its support of the armed forces. I mean, I was in the Navy and I was reading stories daily about, snatched Land Rovers or helicopters that weren't working in Afghanistan, guys being sent out to Iraq or Afghanistan with the wrong kit. And I thought, look, we need to do something about this. And I thought I'd put my head above the parapet and actually join a political party and try and make a difference. And I'd always, knew deep down that I was a Conservative for various reasons. And so I joined the Conservative Party. But I had, I think, possibly the shortest membership of the Conservative Party on record. I joined the Conservative Party in 2007, I think possibly in about the November. And 2 days after my letter came through welcoming me into the Totnes Conservative Association, because I was based in Dartmouth at the time, I got a knock on the door from the Master at Arms, who's the policeman on Dartmouth Naval College, instructing me that because Queen's Regulations Royal Navy stated at the time you couldn't be an active member of a political party, I would have to resign my membership of the Conservatives. So I was a member of the party for a week in about November 2007 before having to resign. Then I rejoined in 2010 when I was at university. So it was really a combination of factors. Also, I felt that we were the party that best stood up for what I believed in and what needed to happen back home in the northeast of Scotland.
And because you mentioned going to university, but you didn't go straight to university because, as you mentioned, joining the Navy, which you did straight after leaving school. Yeah. Give us one or two memorable moments from your time in the Navy. Yeah, I joined the Navy. My granddad was in the Navy for over 20 years, so I just wanted to do what he did. Now, obviously, I haven't done it for 20 years, but I really wanted to serve and to serve in the Navy. I'd grown up with his photographs and seeing what he'd done over those 20 years, and I wanted to be a part of that. Possibly the highlight, although there were many, was when I was involved in the 90th anniversary of the Great War. We had the three remaining veterans of World War I, Harry Patch, Henry Allingham and Bill Stone, and we had them at the cenotaph laying wreaths on behalf of, quite coincidentally, all three armed forces. All three served in different branches of the armed forces. So to be able to be there with them, the last time they were ever in the same place at the same time, within 2 years, all three of them had passed away, and to be able to talk to them about their experiences and their lives and meet their families as well, that was a truly humbling experience and probably something that will stay with me, forever.
well, it becomes real what that generation went through, what they fought for. A generation that fought in the First World War, lived through the Second World War, and then lived the rest of their lives rebuilding this country from the ashes of that war. And it was a real privilege to meet them and have spent some time with them. So that was probably the moment that sticks out amongst many in my head over my 3 and a bit years in the Navy. Yeah.
You're elected to Parliament, and the Parliament that you and I served in, obviously I'm not there now, you still are, but the years following, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, following the snap election and Brexit and the Brexit negotiations, she held that election because she wanted to get a bigger majority to give her a stronger hand in those Brexit negotiations. She lost her majority in 2017. It was a really tough time for everybody, actually, the country, as well as people who were elected to serve them, and whether we did a good job is debatable. But you were Parliamentary Private Secretary to Prime Minister Theresa May between December 2018 until her resignation as Prime Minister. All her premiership was turbulent. You were at her right-hand side during the most turbulent of periods, when her party was turning against her. It was actually, even for an opponent, it was difficult to watch.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, it's just a job, a hugely privileged role to have, to be in the room, to be in those cabinet meetings, to be at the right-hand side of a Prime Minister, travelling with them to various meetings. But it's also, a huge privilege, and you become very, personally involved with the Prime Minister. And we were going through an incredibly tough period as a government, and she was going through a very tough period as Prime Minister, trying to hold the government together, trying to deliver the deal which had been negotiated with the European Union, negotiating with her party, her own party, to try and get that deal across the line with the DUP, we were reliant on to remain in government, with the European Union to try and get some subtle changes to the deal that would make it acceptable to the party and to the DUP. And, some of the personal attacks that she endured through that period, when at the end of the day, all she was trying to do, and I fundamentally believe, having gotten to know her, that every decision she took on the basis that it was in the best interests of the country. She always put the country first in every single thing she did. Now, did she get everything right? Did we get everything right? Absolutely not. But was the intention to deliver a good deal for this country so that ultimately we could move on from the division that Brexit had caused into a new relationship with the EU? Yes, that's what we were trying to do. We didn't manage it, and hindsight's 2020, and it was quite obvious now looking back that deal was probably never going to pass. But it was tough, because you get to know this person. And you see the impact that all of these personal attacks and the trials of the job are having on this individual who you come to care for deeply, and to be that person on which they can rely to support them through the most difficult times was a huge privilege, as I said. But yeah, of course it was tough.
I didn't understand. I used to watch her giving statements for hours and hours while people were questioning her from all sides. Yeah. Some of the toughest questioning arguably from her own side. I used to watch her and think, how do you get out of bed and put one foot in front of the other?
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, I was in awe. Genuinely, some days I was in awe. There was a day that I think she she'd been in a conference with Jean-Claude Juncker the evening before. She'd come back to London, and her voice had gone. She'd had a bit of a cold, but also literal smoke-filled rooms in Brussels. And so she had to stand up at the dispatch box and take questions on the agreement that she'd come to with Jean-Claude Juncker. And I remember she stood up in the statements and started to speak. It became obvious within a few seconds that her voice had gone, and there was a sort of a gasp from the House of Commons. She stood at that dispatch box that day for over 2 hours and took every single question that was put. And I remain, as I said, in awe of her ability to do that, her stamina, her determination to keep going, despite everything that was being thrown at her. Was incredible. Quite an inspiration, actually. Yeah.
Agreed. You get made chairman. You Tory party very much chairman Vice Chair.
Two female leaders, Gloria. Can I remind you? Thank you.
I know, but the Labour Party call them chairs, and I was about to slip into calling you a vice chairman of the Conservative Party. But you resigned from that post last year.
Yes.
Surely a good job. Why would you
resign?
Great
job. It was look. I got made vice chairman when Boris became party leader, became prime minister, with specific remit of youth in the Conservative Party, youth policy overall, and it was a huge privilege to do because I'm really inspired actually by the passion that young people bring to politics and trying to encourage them of all sides to try and encourage them into political debate because I think that they bring an experience from a generation that we don't understand as much because we haven't had the same lived experiences, and an excitement and a passion that sometimes can be worn down when you've been in politics for a little longer. And so, I absolutely loved it. I toured the country speaking to young people, predominantly from the Conservative side of things, but also from other parties, going to universities, and it was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed that job. I'd done it for over 2 years by November 2021, and I found our position on the Owen Paterson situation difficult to defend, and I decided that I was going to take a step back from being in the front line of defending government policy for a while, and I took the decision reluctantly because I did enjoy the job, and decided I'd focus on the constituency side of things for the foreseeable future, and so that's why I did it. Yeah. I do think that the government have learned a lot of lessons from the Owen Paterson, and I think we are moving much more in the right direction now. I think that was a genuine mistake, and I think the Prime Minister himself even acknowledged that at the time, but it was very difficult to defend it.
Very honest. So you were part of the Better Together campaign, the Scottish referendum campaign, Scottish independence referendum campaign. We stayed, but Scotland remains a part of the United Kingdom. That vote was won. Nicola Sturgeon, who described that as a once-in-a-generation decision, says, well, there's been a major shift in the UK politics since the UK left the European Union, and that warrants Scottish people getting another say on their future. What do you say?
As I said, I joined the party in 2007 and again in 2010. This was not an issue when I was growing up. Scotland was in the United Kingdom. We had devolution. Really, all of my political life, we've had devolution. All of my adult life, actually, we've had devolution. And the idea that we would have spent, nearly, 8 years now, talking about nothing else but the Constitution in Scotland, it was unimaginable. It's incredibly depressing because there are so many other issues that we could be talking about and we're not. And, for Nicola to say, the First Minister, to say that, because of Brexit, Scotland needs to have another say, another vote, another referendum on whether or not it should stay a part of the United Kingdom, I think is just completely wrong. The white paper that the Scottish National Party produced ahead of the last referendum said that there was a chance that there would be a referendum on Europe, should the Conservatives get a majority in the 2015 election, and so it was always sort of tied in that there may be a referendum on Europe, and the UK as a whole took a decision to leave the EU. Now I voted to remain. I was working in the European Parliament in 2015, 2016, and I voted to remain. But the UK as a whole voted to leave. And if you believe in democracy and you believe that the results of referenda should be implemented, then ultimately you have to believe that on a whole UK referendum, you had to implement Brexit. Now, I understand that if Scotland was taken as a separate entity from the rest of the United Kingdom and the Scottish result was looked at exclusively, then Scotland voted to remain in the EU. But it wasn't an exclusive Scotland referendum, and over 1 million Scots did vote to leave the EU in that referendum. So to just paint Scotland as being of one opinion on this, I think is completely wrong. What we should be doing now is trying to make Brexit work and actually trying to deal with the fundamental issues that are causing problems in Scotland right now: education, health, transport infrastructure, all the rest of it. That's what I think the First Minister should be talking about and tackling, and not, frankly, a distraction which allows her to talk about something which isn't, pressing on the minds of Scots, and that's another independence referendum. It's frankly ridiculous. She needs to get on with the job.
Okay. We've done a lot of politics.
Yeah.
Let's get back to you.
Okay.
Very exciting news is heading your way. You're going to become a dad in August.
Yeah.
Now, I want to know how involved you have been, how much support you've been giving to your wife. Have you been going to prenatal classes, NCT classes? Tell me how you've both been preparing.
Well, we haven't been at any classes yet, but I've been as involved as I can be. I think the whips are getting a bit annoyed at the amount of time I'm requesting off from them, because 550 miles is a long way. It's not like I can just pop round the corner to St Tommy's and then, back to the office. It's a long way to go, so it involves me taking a whole day off. But I'm not doing it reluctantly. I'm very much enjoying being as involved as I am, and cannot wait for August, even though it's very daunting. Any of my friends would tell you they'd be terrified at the thought of me being responsible for another human being on this planet. So being a dad is, terrifying, but very exciting. And I'll be as involved as, I can be with a job that takes you away to the other end of the country 3-4 days a week.
Is it worth it?
Is the job worth it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The job is a huge privilege. For all the difficulties that we had in 2017 and 19, and all the issues we've had since, and all the criticism you get in the press, this is it remains a huge honour to have this job, to be able to speak up for people that you care about and a place that you care about and call home in the Palace of Westminster, and have a say and be able to input on decisions that really affect people out there in their everyday lives. It's a huge honour and a privilege, and we should never take that for granted. And so, of course it is worth it.
So I wonder if I asked your wife the same question. So for 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 nights a week, she's on her own changing the nappies, isn't she?
Yeah. God,
how are you going to make it up to her at the weekends? Let's get it on record.
I think she may be going off for the weekend and leaving me in charge. The house may be burnt down when she comes back, but no, it's we'll make it work. Other colleagues have had kids and remained MPs, and they've made it work, and we're determined to make it work as well. We've made it work thus far. Her working in Scotland and me being down here 3 days a week, and I'm sure we'll try and make it work. We'll have lots of support from friends and family.
Do you know what you're going to have? You don't have to tell me.
We don't know. We don't know yet. No.
So August, big change coming your way.
Huge change. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk to you about it afterwards, no doubt.
You bet. It might be more bags on the eyes then.
Andrew Bowie, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You can watch my Real Me interviews on our YouTube channel or catch them on the Real Me podcast. Listen wherever you get your podcasts from. Just search for GB News. Parliament today will discuss a public petition calling for a ban on trans conversion therapy. Joining me now is Andrew Boff, LGBT+ Conservative representative and London Assembly member. Hello, welcome back to the show, Andrew. I hope you're well.
I'm delighted to be back. Thank you very much.
So let's look at this afternoon's petition, which at the start of June was signed by over 145,000 members of the public. And this is what they state. The government's own figures show that trans people are nearly twice as likely to be at risk of experiencing the harmful and degrading practices of conversion therapy. So they want to see a ban. Just tell us your thoughts on this.
Well, the government should be there to protect people and to prevent them from undergoing abusive practices. And there is no more abusive practice than conversion therapy. Conversion therapy starts on the basis that there is, or on the assumption that there is something wrong with you or sinful with you and that you need to be fixed. And what it doesn't take account of, conversion therapy, is that people know themselves. They don't need somebody else to tell them who they are. And that's why this debate is going to be very important. The government has half accepted that conversion therapy is wrong, though it puts the cutoff limit at 18. They've half accepted that it's wrong, but they haven't included trans people in those that ban on conversion therapy. And I would suggest they rapidly include trans people because the evidence is such that these conversion therapies are likely to see an increase in depression amongst young people and also the prospect of self-harm.
Well, let's have a look at what the government says. One of the complexities is that those who experience gender dysphoria may seek talking therapy, and it is vital that legitimate support is not inadvertently impacted. That's why they say they're taking this slowly. They're being cautious about this.
Well, they don't need to be cautious. They've spent 3 years looking into this since the consultation was originally launched. And you've got such bodies as the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy clearly coming out and saying that the conversion therapy is an abusive practice and it shouldn't be conducted by any person of note. Now, really, we've got to ask ourselves why it is that it should be banned. Surely it's people's free choice to undergo any kind of therapy they want, you would argue. However, we do ban things like quack cancer cures because people who are desperate will often try anything. And there are too many charlatans out there who want to tell you that you can do this through the application of some snake oil or whatever it is they are selling to you. The fact is that conversion therapy does not work, and it is an abusive practice, and those people who undergo it are more likely to consider self-harm. That's nothing that that's nothing that we as a civilized society should be condoning, and I want the government to step clearly on the side of those people who are at threat from this torture, because I believe it is torture, conversion therapy.
Final question. We've got about a minute left. Do you think parts of your party, at the top of your party even, do you think they have problems with the trans community?
I think there's a real problem in all parties, actually. We've seen both the Green Party, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party having an internal debate about trans issues. And I wonder what that debate's really about, because trans people have the right to exist. They are citizens. They have right to the same rights as everybody else. And I want Parliament to stand up for that. And I would also ask those people who are dubious about giving rights to trans people about looking at the evidence. There is no evidence whatsoever that conversion therapy works. There is no evidence whatsoever that trans people are in any way a threat to anyone else. I just wish they would look at the facts and then come to a conclusion.
We could debate this for so much longer, but I'm very grateful.
We certainly could. We go well beyond the 1 p.m. news bulletin.
We will talk again. Thank you for your time again today. Thank you, Andrew Buff. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, and he is here with me now. What's coming up?
We're talking about GDP, Gloria. What's that? That's the whole size of the economy. Official figures come out every month, and it turns out that in April, our economy actually shrank, just as it did in March. That's not particularly good news. There are some good signs. Retail sales are still doing quite well. Another good sign, something we've been calling for on the money for a while, is that the government's regulatory watchdog, the Competition and Markets Authority, is going to investigate if petrol retailers are over-egging those petrol and diesel prices, profiteering, if you like. Of course, they would deny that, but the government wants to have a closer look. So we'll be covering all that, plus having a quick look, as we often do on the money, at British farming as the government unveils its strategy for more food security.
Look forward to watching as ever. Thank you, Liam. You've been watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Couldn't get my name right then. Gloria De Piero. Join me again tomorrow at noon. Now it is time for your weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather from the Met Office. Things hotting up this week. Pleasant enough out there today in the sunny spells, light winds. It's not dry and fine everywhere. There are a few showers across the northwest. These weather fronts trying to push in, but this area of high pressure is dominating and will really establish itself, certainly across the southern half of the country throughout this week. Weak weather fronts still bringing some cloud, though, and patchy rain over the Highlands and pushing into the Northern Isles. Maybe 1 or 2 showers across southwest Scotland and 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland. But certainly much of eastern Scotland dry, most of England and Wales dry and fine. Yes, quite a bit of cloud developing this afternoon, but most places still seeing some good spells of sunshine. And temperatures around, or maybe a touch above average, into the low 20s across the southeast, high teens for much of northern Britain. And across the north, particularly north of Scotland, we'll continue to see some showers coming in overnight. Otherwise, though, it's mostly dry night. I think we'll see the cloud melting away quite rapidly, so generally clear skies as we head towards the start of Tuesday. Temperatures will drop with those clear skies and light winds down into single figures. So a reasonably fresh start to Tuesday, but generally a fine, bright and sunny day. Certainly probably more sunshine than today over the heart of England and northern England. Still maybe 1 or 2 showers, northern England, southern Scotland, and certainly the Highlands and the Western Isles will continue to see some rain at times. But most of Northern Ireland, dry, fine and sunny, and warming up across England and Wales. Temperatures more widely over 20 Celsius. In the southeast, 23, 24 is possible. Cooler with that wetter weather in the northwest, which will continue into Tuesday evening. And always the likelihood of some rain at times across the northwest. More weather fronts pushing in here as we head towards Wednesday. But the high pressure will continue to dominate further south. And as it shifts further east, hotter air will waft up from the south. And by Friday, across the southeast, we could be over 30 Celsius.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're